like I was going to do a finish cut to begin with. And the reason I do that is because I can get the motion, how up, because when I want to do the final one, to come in blind and all of a sudden have to do that and get it right, because you can't go any thinner, is really tough. So if you can kind of practice what you're doing, look at it, you'll find out it'll be much easier to go do it. You're not a speed race. You don't have to take a ½ inch off at a time. None of us would do that, would they? Except me. And I just rotate my little tool. The closer I get to the center, I want to go slower and slower, take less of a cut, be cautious, make it nice and smooth. See if there's transitions you don't like ahead of time, so you know where you got to work. But otherwise, it looks pretty good. It's going to be in my way eventually. I'm looking at how much thickness I have. The bottom of this bowl, I'm not going to put a foot on it. I'll take the foot off of it all the way in this particular case. Only because I know it's off center a little bit and I want it to kind of give it that impression that it can rock back and forth. Almost a bottomless, footless bowl, so it can rock if need be if you put something in it. And it looks like I have about 1 inch, so I'm a little bit thinner here than I am up here, so thick here, take more off here. So my arc, pick it up. At home, I forgot to bring them. I have little inside-outside calipers. And what I'll do is I'll find out where the highs and lows. And if I really want to, I will say I want to do, say, a 3/8 thick wall all the way around. This is already set in stone. We're done with this one, right? You know, pretty much I would sand this one if she was outside already before I flipped it. Then I would mark a couple lines in here, see how far I would get from that 3/8 of an inch, and I would just take my parting tool. I know I have to cut an 1/8 inch down because that brings it down to 3/8, and now I'll put little channels at different points. All right, and then I can follow from here, as long as you're following to the channel, to the next one, to the next one. Once they all meet up as you come around, you've got the same thickness again. If you want to be nice and easy about it. Or you can use a light technique if you're going from the outside light and see where you can see shadow through. It doesn't work as well with these type bowls because you see the light a lot of the time. A solid bowl, it makes much more sense. So we're getting close to being pretty well even across there. We're going to get my friend out of my way. And I'm going to grab the short one. Now that I have the ability to raise it up. Move this in. I want the support more in the close. Miss there, miss there. Good. I'm having to be really careful because the back of my hand is really close to the bark. But I want to grab it. Setting that on the floor, but I don't want to screw up the floor.
Is that a different grind or is it just a sharp depth?
No, this is a bottom gouge, but I wanted something a little heavier because I'm sitting farther off the tool rest than I normally would be. Okay, like I said, at home I use curved tool rests, and they're a lot easier because I can control that I'm pretty well equidistant from the whole section of the curve. Well, when you start going different distances, my smaller ones that I like using a lot will bounce too much just because you're hanging off of them. And at home, this thing's only set up doing 1,000 RPM. I would be turning this at somewhere around 2,000 to 3,000 RPM. Faster I turn it, the less time I'm cutting air, the more smooth feel I get as I turn into it. I'm really, since this thing isn't even bolted, this can go up higher. I haven't played with this one too much. Sounds like a little jet airplane taking off. It was 1,300, it said. So I'm going to want that a little thinner. Yeah, it says 1,300 RPM. Yeah, this is about half the speed I would normally be turning. That's getting close. Raise this up a little bit. So all I do is make the bottom of the bowl flat. He's close. How hard is it going to be to put that other foot thing back on here again? We'll see. Come here, you. Oh. Come on. have a... Oh, you do? Oh man, that makes it tougher. Okay. That's okay, we'll do it the other way. This thing pop up or down to walk it? Ah, there we go. That's okay, we'll do it the other way. Like my homemade chuck? All this is a faceplate, piece of nice rock hard maple, Home Depot PVC, groove cut in it, epoxied all the way around, set in. I actually have a hole drilled. This is my vacuum chuck. And then a closed self piece of foam glued to the top of it. Normally what I'll do is I will play with, but I have that little hole right there, that dimple. Down here. There we go. Do. So all I did was just take my foot off, raise this up. I've got one of Jimmy's concave points. Allows me to get in there, close to the headstock. It's still a scraper. So if I need to. And a small natural edge bolt. Sand the bottom off. And put whatever things I want. First I would have sanded it before I took it off. I just pass it along. Play with your wood. Take multiple tiny cuts. It's not going to hurt. You're not in a speed race. Get you in the groove of tinkering with it, seeing what the bark will do, will not. A lot of times when you get to the bark, I said, be really careful. Light cuts are better than heavy cuts. In this case, speed is your friend in ways, because the less time you're cutting air, your tool isn't shattering from contact, no contact all the time. Unless you're doing a natural edge live bark all the way around 360 and it's perfectly flat. Yeah, how's that going to happen? Not very often. You can do it. You can plan for it. You can get pretty close. But if you have questions, feel free to ask.
So Scott, one of the things, being an old person, I have trouble seeing the bowl sometimes, and I've discovered once in a while it's useful to take one of Larry's lights and put them on the other side of the bowl from where I'm cutting.
It doesn't matter who it is, as long as you have a high enough intensity lumen source. The better point source, the better. What you can do by putting it on the other side, the other thing is to put the backdrop behind. Here I'm going from a white to a black to a blue. You're looking at the back side of it. You can actually put a whiteboard or a blackboard behind it, depending upon what wood you're turning, and it will make the contrast from the edging of the bowl that you're seeing, as in this case the shadow edge of the bowl, it will pop up more so you can see it. If it's a solid bowl, you can use that light source to tell how thin it is. And it's a little thick on the bottom. I was really curious, not coming in, whether or not I would poke through the bottom. I didn't have my gauge with me, so. Sometimes it's better safe than sorry. That would not make a really good funnel. Some of the other round ones would make an okay funnel. You know, and I have made funnels. I will admit that. If you haven't, you're probably not trying hard enough. Especially when the thinner you go, the more likely you're going to screw it up. But the bigger your return when it's done and done right. Okay, so again, if you're practicing that slow final cut, even if you're just taking dust off, you're doing okay. You know, take that nice slow approach, get it to where you want it.
You have, Scott, that big piece of maple that you had up on top when you first started.
Yeah?
Could you bring that out and show us how you would cut it to get the best figure and what we could do wrong that would make it more?
Yeah. I assume you're referring to this one?
Yeah.
Okay. First thing you have to understand is if you look at the back side of it, you can see how far this figure goes through. By looking at this texture on this side, I can tell you that this is what I call a quilted or pillow maple. If this was like a fiddleback, these would be more in rows. Okay? So this tells you a little bit about what you get inside. And like I said, as you go through and you flip it over, you can see that this side of the board does not have as much character as this side of the board. Now, if I look back at the top, I see up here this flat section. And this is a little bit flatter, but I can kind of see what's going on here as you start looking at the side. You can see it. It only goes, it's pretty shallow. Where if I flip it to the other side, look, I start seeing these character lines. That means I know most of my character on this board is from here going this way. Okay? I want these parallel to my viewing surface. Does that make sense? Because if I'm viewing it this way, looking down on this board, I'm going to see this character. If I look at it on a perpendicular, looking at it from this angle, I'm not going to see it. It's just going to go away. So I'm going to lose it a little bit on the sides. You can see it's got a little less character than it does on the top. And those pepper grinder I showed you shows you that. So knowing that, and I'm looking at this, if I was going to make a bowl, okay, if I wanted a natural edge, I would probably put it on this end. If I wanted this texture on the outside knobbiness to show up on the rim of the bowl. Okay? But looking here, when I do that, I'm going to cut off, I want to make this a fairly steep bowl. Because I'm going to lose this non-character piece of wood that sits on this back side over here. I got a little bit here, I got nothing here. So as it kind of goes this way, because you can see it a little bit in here, you're going to go, and you notice in the bottom goes here, so if I'm centering off, I'm not going to have much. So I want to bring it up a little bit, because I want to make sure I have the character, and then I would core probably 3 or 4 of them really thin. Knowing that when I'm going to do those, I'm going to turn them that day, start to finish, and then I'm going to let the bowl move. Okay. If I had to let it sit 3-6 months to dry, I'm going to want a thick wall bowl because it's going to move. Thin walls, you can sit there, you can turn them on the lathe, put a nice, though they still sell them occasionally, buy them before they all disappear. Your 100-watt light bulbs or 75-watt incandescents, they generate heat. They're good at that. They're 98% heat generation, 2% light. Okay? So, if you have that bowl turning that's wet on your lathe at a low speed, you put it up there on a little movable head light and let it spin and run at slow speed for half an hour, an hour. It's going to dry that wood out and it's not going to move as much. Okay? Because it's getting consistent, even heat, moisture's wicking out of it, for all the little fresh pores, and it's going to disappear. Now it won't move as much, you want to let it move more. Set it to one side and let it do what it's going to do. It'll move as much as it wants. Yes, Vern?
Would you consider using the thin section of character and make a plate out of it, and then use the rest of the log and fume that part because it doesn't have the character?
Or what you would do is say if I flip the bowl over and I left the character in the bottom of the bowl where I want it, right? And I cut this here, instead of making a deep bowl, I make a really shallow, more of a platter, right? Those faces on the outside edge of that platter may not have as much character because they're farther away from the character, right? Well, that's perfect time to sit there and say, well, let's paint the outside rim, let's make it wide, let's make it black, let's put that Cosmos paint on it and blow it around so we get that iridescent on the outside, but I look at the center of it and I see all this beautiful pillow, maple, right? That's paying attention to what you're going to do with it. I mean, I'd hate to sit there and cover up a beautiful piece of maple with Cosmos, no matter how much I like Cosmos. And the other one I like now I see is called Floetrol. It's really weird. You mix this stuff with about 10 different types of acrylic paint. You put them in a cup, and you turn it upside down, and you let it flow off the edges, and it does some really cool shit. And they sit there and they play with torches, and they tip it back and forth. Looks like a waste of a lot of paint to me, but I've seen some beautiful bandsaw boxes done with the face of the boxes done with that. And I just haven't figured out how to do it on a bowl.
If you do it, check Carl Jacobson's videos, but if you do it in an oil pan and you let the paint dry each time, then you get what's called cordite, and you can turn that into keychains and stuff.
And I've seen how they put bubbles on ceramic mugs. There's no reason you couldn't do it to the outside of a bowl, wooden bowl.
Yeah.
I would probably seal the surface first. You know, so there's things you can do if you have what I would call an ugly piece of wood, straight grain, it has no character, no life, just straight stuff. There's ways to utilize that to gain something out of what you're doing. But you want to plan it ahead of time. Like I said, you got a nice solid chunk of pillow, show the whole darn thing. Like I said, if you were to make this one shallow, and just put this as the bottom, that whole thing from edge to edge is going to show pillow. It's going to slowly disappear, even if the pillow's there, as you go up the sides, the farther you're away from that bottom edge grain, but it's still going to be there. And eventually you're going to get to the point where there is nothing. Well, if that's at the top edge of a bowl, who cares? Right? That's not where your eye is going to get drawn. So what you may want to do is how to draw your eye into the bottom. That would be the point where maybe you paint it black or brick red. You know, something to differentiate and gain a little contrast between it and the rest of the bowl. And plan what kind of finish you're going to put on it. Because if you have a wood like this one, chatoyance is your best friend. 14 coats of lacquer, no matter how long and tiring it's going to be to put 14 coats of lacquer and sand, if you do it the way my dad did years ago, you know, sanding to 800 wet between each coat as you do the whole car, you know, you're going to end up with this deep, deep depth to your piece because of the lacquer that sits on top of it. So you may want to play at what you're trying to do with it, you know, plan, look, go all the way around. If you have to, take a slice. You know, take a slice off the edge of the board. Oh, I'm being told that I talk too much. Any other quick questions?
Where's my fault I asked?
If not, feel free to ask. I'll gladly help in how you want to do a bowl. Ask questions or vases or vases. It makes a difference. Even when I do a pepper grinder, it makes a difference in how they show up and what I want them to do. I'll sit there and turn things around and say, okay, if that didn't work, I'll try something else.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Scott.